French learners, the French de is one of the most pitfalls for English speakers, and it's usually because we try to translate it directly. In this lesson, I'm breaking down the logic behind the so you can stop guessing and start speaking with confidence.
When do you use it? Usually, you're just handed this massive, boring textbook list of verbs and told, hey, just memorize this. But we are absolutely not doing that today. Instead, we're going to look at a really clear, structured blueprint that actually organizes all this chaos into completely predictable patterns. We are finally going to demystify de once and for all. Let's get into it.
So here is our super quick step-by-step agenda. We're breaking these dense rules down into 5 really digestible categories. Actions et emotions, noms et quantité, la négation et le partitif, possession et provenance, and finally, exception et stratégie. Starting right off with category 1, actions
and feelings.
This is where verbs and adjectives team up to express what we do and exactly how we feel.
On one hand, we have verbs that take the preposition de, such as rêver de, refuser de. On the other hand, we have adjectives that express emotions, such as être fou de, to be crazy with, être fier de, to be proud of. We also have expressions that express needs or desires, such as avoir besoin de. You can also find the preposition de in impersonal expressions that follow this pattern. C'est plus adjective plus de plus infinitive, such as c'est important de parler le français. C'est difficile de comprendre le français.
Now, there's a really fascinating contrast here between formal textbook grammar and how actual native speakers talk in the real world. Often, you'll learn this rigid structure, il est plus an adjective plus de, like il est important de, meaning it is important to. But honestly, scratch that. Skip the il est and just use c'est instead. C'est important de sounds infinitely more natural. Another quick example? Instead of saying il est difficile de comprendre, just say c'est difficile de comprendre. It is the exact same structure, but it instantly upgrades your conversational fluency. And this perfectly illustrates how our emotions and physical states just kind of lock on to the preposition de. Think about these really vivid, fun expressions.
Il meurt de faim.
For starving, literally dead of hunger. Vert de rage, green with anger. Amoureux de, in love with, or responsable de, responsible for. What you really have to remember here is that the adjective adapts to who's speaking, but the de stays completely anchored. So if a woman is furious, it becomes feminine.
Elle est verte de rage, féminine. Il est vert de rage, masculine.
But that preposition, it never wavers. Before we jump to the next section, let's talk strategy for a second. Instead of blindly trying to memorize every single verb in the French language that takes de, use this actionable study method instead. Do your targeted exercises and pay really close attention to your own specific mistakes. Then, take only the verbs that actually trip you up and write them down in a dedicated vocabulary notebook right alongside the preposition. Writing them out physically builds muscle memory, and you only spend your precious study time on what you actually get wrong. It's a total game changer.
Moving right along to our second category,
Nom et quantité.
nouns, groups, and measuring things.
First up, we have these things.
Called locution propositive.
Think of these as basically inseparable groups of words that function together as a single preposition. You'll notice they're mostly used for locations or for expressing causes. We've got à côté de for next to, autour de for around, or à cause de for because of. They are a total package deal. You cannot break them apart. For example, nous rions à cause de ta blague. We're laughing because of your joke. Or, il est assis à côté de moi. He's sitting next to me. Okay, pay attention to this one, because comparing the container to the contents is a massive trap for French learners. Think about the phrase une tasse à café. The here just describes the type or the purpose of the cup. It's an empty coffee cup sitting on a shelf. But listen to the difference. Une tasse de café. Boom.
Here, the de actually fills that cup up with the liquid. It becomes a cup of coffee. De is giving you the actual quantity. The exact same thing goes for a wine glass. Un verre à vin is just the empty glass, but un verre de vin means you've actually got some wine to drink.
On one hand, we have container. On the other hand, we have quantity. We also have other expressions of quantity such as trop de, assez de, moins de, beaucoup de, un morceau de, une bouteille de, un kilo de, and so on.
But, this is French, so of course there are exceptions. While quantities like beaucoup, meaning a lot, or un tas, meaning a bunch, always use de, you really need to remember this major rule breaker because it constantly catches students off guard. The word plusieurs, which means several, stands completely on its own. It never takes de. No way. You don't say plusieurs de choses, you just simply say j'ai compris plusieurs choses. I understood several things. We are cruising right into category 3.
Portions and negation with partitive articles.
Let's start with the partitive. Whenever you want some of a whole, like a portion of soup or just a little bit of help, you use the partitive. It naturally combines de with the definite article. So you get de la soupe for something feminine or de l'aide when the word starts with a vowel. But notice what happens with masculine and plural words. De plus la merges to become du, like due respect. And de plus le merges into de. The word de is literally hiding inside those words. You're going to hear this constantly with food, like when you want some bread, je voudrais du pain.
And that brings us to the ultimate anchor for negation. Think about an affirmative sentence. Tu as de la chance. You're lucky, or literally, you have some luck. But the very second you make that negative, watch what happens to the partitive. Tu n'as pas de chance. Did you catch that? The de la completely collapses down into just de, pas de. The exact same magic trick happens with our soup example from earlier. Je veux de la soupe instantly becomes je ne veux pas de soupe. It doesn't even matter if the noun is feminine, masculine, or plural. In a standard negative sentence, the whole shebang shrinks down to simply de.
Category 4 tackles possession and provenance, ownership and origins.
For English speakers, you basically have to completely reverse engineer your brain when it comes to ownership. In English, we put the owner first, we slap an apostrophe S on it, and then we name the object, right? Like, my parents' house. In French, that structure literally does not exist. The object has to come first, followed by our handy preposition de, and then the owner, la maison de mes parents. Literally, the house of my parents. Or instead of saying the teacher's book, it becomes le livre du professeur.
In English, you say Sarah's car, but in French, we say the car of Sarah, la voiture de Sarah.
Now let's chat about provenance, where someone is actually coming from. To master this, we first have to define what makes a country feminine in French. And honestly, the rule is delightfully simple. If the country's name ends in the letter E, like France, it's feminine. Simple as that. And for those feminine countries, we use du to say we come from there.
See how logically this builds? Because France is feminine, it just gets a simple, elegant de. Il vient de France. He comes from France. Portugal, on the other hand, does not end in an E. It's masculine. So to say he's returning from Portugal, we combine de plus le to make du. Il rentre du Portugal. It's a really satisfying pattern once you see it.
We also use de for cities, such as Paris, je viens de Paris. New York, je viens de New York. Londres, je viens de Londres. Yaoundé, je viens de Yaoundé. Dakar, je viens de Dakar.
But what about physical materials? Well, this classic fable title from the incredibly famous 17th century author Jean de La Fontaine perfectly illustrates the very traditional rule. Le pot de terre et le pot de fer, the earthen pot and the iron pot. Traditionally, en was always the go-to for describing what something is physically made of.
But jumping back to the 21st century, unless you are actively reciting 17th century poetry at the grocery store, modern French speakers almost always prefer using en instead of de for physical materials. So today, you're so much more likely to hear un canapé en cuir for a leather sofa, or un bracelet en or for a gold bracelet. It's just a much more natural, contemporary way to speak.
Finally, let's pull back the curtain on Category 5, exceptions and strategies. We have to confront those strange little grammatical quirks that confuse absolutely everyone.
Let's look at when de needs an article attached to it, and when it doesn't. The ultimate rule of thumb here is specificity. If we're talking about a super general concept, keep it to just de. C'est une histoire de famille. It's a family story. But the exact moment you zoom in and talk about a very specific defined entity, like the royal family of England, you must add the definite article. It becomes l'histoire de la famille royale. It's not just any family anymore, it's the specific family.
And here, my friends, is the quirk that basically defies all logic. Remember how we said feminine countries like France just use a simple de? Like we say l'histoire de France or les fleuves de France. But mysteriously, when you start discussing politics, the government, or the presidency, it suddenly switches to de la. We say la politique de la France. Why? Honestly, there isn't really a great logical reason. It's just one of those weird quirks of the language you just kind of have to accept and memorize.
So to wrap up your study strategy, just embrace these final 3 hacks. First, while some passive voice sentences do use de, just default to using par to keep your life simple. It almost always works perfectly. Second, write those weird political exceptions down in your notebook so you memorize them visually. And third, just be grateful that masculine countries always follow the rules. They use de across the board, no matter what.
And that is your blueprint. By putting these rules into neat little buckets, Den suddenly makes a whole lot more sense, right? But hey, theory is one thing. Actually speaking it fluently in the real world is a completely different ballgame. So if you are absolutely ready to ditch those confusing lists entirely and actually practice these conversational strategies, you have this amazing option to learn and speak directly with teacher Emanuela. She holds a university degree and has many, many years of experience specifically teaching conversational and fluency French. Working directly with her is going to drastically enhance your speaking skills, dial in your pronunciation, and give you that crucial on-the-spot correction. If this explainer helped clear the fog around French grammar for you, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. But before you go, ask yourself, the next time you try to describe something in French, are you still going to be guessing in the dark, or will you use this blueprint to finally speak with true confidence?
Did the lesson help you clear up the confusion? Let me know in the comments. What's the one French grammar rule that still feels impossible to master? Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more expert-led French lessons and tips from a professional teacher. À bientôt! Au revoir!